Hello and welcome to Special Stage 6, Rally Sport Magazine's Special Stage Rally podcast. We're back again for another fortnight. With me is Peter Whitten. We're going to go through all things rally before we jump into a Nathan Quinn interview, which I'm sure you'll enjoy. How are you going today, Peter?
I'm going well, Luke, and what a busy couple of weeks it's been.
Yeah, it's Australian Rally Championship, done and dusted for the first round. New Zealand Championship, done as well, and there's state rounds going everywhere. So it's a good time of year.
Yeah, it certainly is, Luke, and it's good to see that the weather's cooling down a bit. We're getting into that autumn sort of weather pattern where the roads are a bit damper and there's a bit less dust around. So, yeah, really looking forward to the next few months.
I want to grab your quick thoughts on Rally Launceston. Peter, we weren't there, but what were your thoughts on the action?
Yeah, as you said, Luke, we were there. We were sitting beside a cricket ground watching you and Matt clinch the premiership for the second year in a row. So well done for that. But yeah, it was a great event, wasn't it? And certainly lots and lots of surprises. I mean, I guess most of us probably thought that Harry Bates would bounce back pretty strongly after his disappointing end to last year, but a mechanical problem on the first day and then a crash on the second day meant that it was Lewis again who came through with the goods.
Funny that Harry hasn't bounced back. Like, he's had the few mechanical issues towards the end of last year. Then he had the Coffs crash, and now they're sort of mixed together in that Rally Launceston result. I wonder where he's sitting in terms of how he's feeling with regards to pressure. I think subconsciously he would know that he's the fastest guy in the field, and I'm sure he'd be confident in saying that. But yeah, where does his confidence lie, and I guess in terms of pressure of actually doing the job and getting it done?
It's a tough question, isn't it? And it's really interesting because Lewis has been the guy over the past 2 or 3 years who's obviously quite a bit back from Harry's pace, but that changed around towards the end of last year when Harry started to have some problems. And now the boot's on the other foot. So Lewis is the one who's accumulating points event by event, and Harry's already on the back foot having a DNF in the first heat. So it's a tough one. I mean, I think mentally that's not a problem for him. I mean, he knows he's fast enough to win the championship, and he's proven that time and again. But yeah, a couple of issues with the mechanical reliability of the Yaris over the last 6 months. So that's something for the team to work on as well.
We spoke last podcast to Lewis, obviously, in the interview that followed our chat, Peter, and I asked Lewis about lifespanning parts. And that part of Harry's that broke, the exhaust manifold that created, obviously, the issue for him in Adelaide, I believe it was last year, and then, of course, at Rally Launceston, he said they changed the way they lifespan that part. So clearly it's an ongoing issue. And even though they had the issue last year, it's resurfaced again.
Yeah, and I think it's probably back to the budget that's involved and the amount of testing that's done. Obviously, the AP4 car is designed, built and developed in Australia, in Canberra, by the Neil Bates Motorsport team, but clearly they don't have the resources or the availability to do as much testing as they probably do on an R5 car or a Rally 2 car in Europe that Skoda might do, or that even Toyota's doing on their new Rally 2 Yaris. So even though they have changed the lifespanning of the parts, yeah, you're always going to get these issues, I guess, where something fails unexpectedly.
Eddie Maguire was excluded a couple of days ago from the event. He'd won the Production Cup, but he's been excluded. Can you basically explain a little bit about that? And you spoke to him?
Yeah, I spoke to Eddie, and he basically said that, I mean, he jumped in at the last minute. The Buckby Motorsport car is generally driven by Ben Newman. Ben, I think, had a back issue in the week or two leading up to the event, so Eddie jumped in at the last minute. He didn't sit in the car until the Thursday morning test day. He hasn't seen the car since he parked it at Parc Ferme after the rally. But I think there was an issue with two different production model engines and those parts getting mixed up or getting joined together, which apparently was against the rules. Eddie told me that there was certainly no performance advantage as far as the Subaru went. He said that the Subaru that he drove was well down on power compared to the Mitsubishi that he normally runs. So it's an unfortunate thing. I mean, it's I'm sure it wasn't a blatant attempt to cheat or to gain an advantage. It's just one of those unfortunate things. But for Eddie, it means that he doesn't have any points from the first round, and he was looking at perhaps hiring an R5 car for the WA event. So that's probably not likely to happen anymore.
It's a real shame. And Eddie's such a great guy in terms of coming out of the box and being competitive. Clearly, he won the Production Cup at the weekend prior to his exclusion. Last year as well, he was fast in his Mitsubishi. So he's a great driver, and he's shown that on tarmac and on gravel. And yeah, hopefully we're able to see more of him this season.
For sure. And as you say, he's fast on tarmac. He's a 2-time Targa Tasmania winner. So he's no slouch behind the wheel, but he does love the gravel. And we spoke to him last year, and he was looking at an R5 option. And he said there's a few irons in the fire at the moment. So I don't think we'll see him at Western Australia, judging by what he said. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw him back in the ARC in a much quicker car towards the end of the season.
Let's all cross our fingers for that one. The Otago Rally that happened at the weekend. Lots of Australians over there. Obviously, lots of Kiwis and internationals that compete at that event every year. You were across there running our spectator tour. First of all, how did that go? How were the guests treated? Did they enjoy their time over there?
Yeah, they did. I mean, we had 20 guests for the tour this year, and we had a great time. We had a couple of days before the rally on the Thursday. We went out to the Larnac Castle and did a tour out there, and then we went to the dinner with the stars on the Thursday night. And on Friday, we went out onto the Otago Peninsula and did some sightseeing and had lunch at the Portobello pub, and then went to the rally start, and then 2 days of action over the weekend. So yeah, it was a really good time. The weather was pretty good most of the time. You never really know in Dunedin being so far south. The first stage we went to on the Saturday morning was thick fog, so it was difficult to see for us, let alone the drivers. But then by the afternoon, we're up on the Shag Valley stage, which is, I think, it's the best view anywhere in the world for a rally, I would imagine. And the weather was clear and blue. So yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag over the weekend, but again, a very good and enjoyable rally.
Hayden Paddon clearly was the class of the field, as was Mikko Hirvonen in their respective classes. Stuart Reid finished sixth in the classics. Richie Dalton retired. Can you tell me a little bit how some of those Australians went, or I guess some of those adopted Australians in the terms of Stuart and Richie?
Well, firstly, let's chat about Hayden Paddon. I mean, he and John Kennard again put on an absolutely faultless performance in the Hyundai i20 Rally 2. Hayden, it was his 10th win in that event, so it's his favourite event for the year. The Curry Bush stage, we all look forward to the in-car, which Hayden put out yesterday, and I think he was half a second quicker than his stage record. Just incredible drive, and it just goes to show that Hayden was so far ahead of everybody else, and I guess we expect that. Mikko Hirvonen, his first time there, he was, I think, first slated to come out to the Otago Rally about 5 or 6 years ago. Initially, that was scuppered by a clash with his mini rally raid program, and then obviously COVID came on the scene, and that stopped that for a few years. But he was a great asset to the event. He's a really, really nice guy, Mikko. He raved about the event, about the roads. He put in a faultless performance as well. Didn't put a mark on the escort, and came away with a convincing win, I guess. It was a bit over a minute, but Dean Buist, who's a Christchurch guy, who does pace, he runs on pace notes, but he actually doesn't do the recce. So for him to come out, he's I think a 3-time winner of the event, twice in the classics and once overall. For him to finish second was a great effort.
Definitely those Australians, or those Australian-based drivers, Glenn Alcorn, Jerry McGroarty, Paul Laif, Brian Van Eck, Peter Sky. There was plenty that went over there, and I think most of them finished.
Yeah, and that's pretty much right. I mean, I guess there were a couple that didn't finish. We had 3 Commodores go over from Victoria with Braden Kendrick, Anthony Morrow, and Craig Jarvie. Braden retired on the first day with engine issues, but they got that sorted on the Saturday night, and he typically, and as always, threw plenty of rocks and gravel at the spectators, and won a big following again. So that was good to see. And quite a few of those guys, their cars are staying in New Zealand, so they're going to do the South Canterbury round, which is a round of the New Zealand Championship again. I think it's in about 10 weeks' time, so that'll be really good to see those guys competing.
Before we move on from the Otago Rally, Richie Dalton retired, unfortunately, but Stuart Reid got a good result. Tell me a bit about their weekends.
Yeah, Stewie Reid, he was driving a Mazda RX-7, a Group B car, which was previously owned by Richard Kelsey. I actually competed against that Mazda back in 2007 over in that event, and I think Stuart had a few issues just getting used to the car. It was his first drive in it, but he finished 6th in the classics, which is a really good effort. Richie Dalton had an unfortunate retirement. He'd leased Skoda Fabia R5. Unfortunately for Richie, he hit a fence post on the second stage, which broke the steering, put him out for the first day, and for whatever reason, they couldn't get a replacement steering rack for the car. So it was a long trip over for Richie and Matt Kieran's for no result. Should also mention that expat Aussie John Spencer, who now lives in Dunedin, he was driving his Datsun 1600 with longtime co-driver Tony Best in the passenger seat. They slid off the road on a very slippery Berwick Forest stage on Sunday morning, hit a tree. The car wasn't too badly damaged, but and Tony got out of it okay, but John had some back issues and had to get helicoptered to hospital. He's got a broken back, I think, so he's going to take a bit of time to recover. So we wish John all the best, and hopefully we'll see him back out there again soon.
We hope so. We hope so. The H6 Subarus are an interesting part of the Otago Rally, and I guess they're a part of the whole New Zealand Rally Championship scene. They're as part of the classic four-wheel drive section. They're six-cylinder, naturally aspirated Subarus. You can hire them from Magnum Motorsport, which is Jeff Judd's business. You seem to take a liking to them across the weekend.
They're really good. They ran in the four-wheel drive classic field, as you said, so they were the first cars on the road. There were 9 of the Subaru H6s. So for those who don't know, they're pretty much a GC Impreza, which has had the H6 3-litre 6-cylinder motor out of a Subaru Outback put into them. So they're a four-wheel drive 6-cylinder rally car, obviously no turbo, but they've got plenty of torque. They handle well. They sound fantastic, and they're getting a real following. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if we did start to see some of those cars being built in Australia, because they're good value for money.
You've got a feature coming up on them, and we've heard that a couple of Australians have got some booked for Otago next year, so they're not going anywhere anytime soon.
No, that's right. Yeah, I think Juddy was telling me a couple of days ago that both his cars that are up for lease or have been leased for the Otago Rally for next year by Aussies. And of course, the Otago Rally themselves hire one for the Rally for their guest driver, who this year was Sarah Walker, the Olympic BMX medalist.
The next round of the Australian Rally Championship is the Forest Rally, which is across in Western Australia. The supplementary regulations came out recently, and therefore entries are open. I'm sure they're flooding in. There's only 59 kilometres of action on Sunday. I wrote a few comments on it in the article that I put out for the release of those regs. My thoughts are that it's just too short for a Sunday, particularly when it counts as a fully fledged heat of the ARC. What are your thoughts, Peter? Do you think it should be a little bit longer as well?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't really understand the reasoning behind having short days on Sunday. The competitors are there for the weekend. It's not like they need to finish early on the Sunday afternoon to get home, because the power stage is not run generally until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, maybe there's some organisation regarding the power stage and all the stuff that needs to happen for the TV coverage. But I mean, if we're having 100, 120 kilometres on a Saturday for the Heat 1, I can't see why we can't be having 80, 90, 100 kilometres on the Sunday as well. And that it means that Heat 2 has as much weight to it as Heat 1, rather than just having a short day, because any small problem on the second day of the event can really put you out of the running.
We must be grateful, though. I had a look at the BRC, or the British Rally Championship itineraries from last year, and some of the numbers are quite low. They're mostly one-day events, but there's a one-day event in there that has 69 competitive kilometres, and there's ones in there 85 competitive Ks, 71. So we've got 2-day events all around Australia, which is a great thing. We don't want it to go back to one-day events, but yeah, we're getting a bit more action than the Brits are in their national championship.
Yeah, I think too, we probably really can't compare apples with apples in that regard, because we don't know what regulations and things the British Championship have without having a close look at them. But certainly rallies have got shorter and shorter as the years have gone by. And interestingly, when I was coming back from New Zealand the other day, I was reading a magazine, had some comments from Marco Ulen, who won the Tour de Corse rally a couple of times in the 1980s, and he was saying that one event that he won had 13 hours of driving. That's 13 hours of special stages. So it's just incredible that now on an ARC round on a Sunday, we're having 35, 40 minutes of driving.
Things change as they do, but guys are going much quicker these days as well. So that's another thing. Next up on this episode of Special Stage, we've got our interview with Nathan Quinn, who talks about all things G4. Obviously, he had his win in Heat 2 at Rally Launceston, and he's looking forward to going ahead to the Forest Rally, which is an exciting thing for the Australian Championship. So that's coming up next with Nathan Quinn. Peter, you're yet to listen to it, but I'm sure you'll tune in after we publish the podcast.
Yes, Luke. Yeah, I'm looking forward to listening to what Quinny had to say, because he's always good value whenever we have a chat. So he's one of those guys that isn't afraid to say what he thinks, and I'm sure that the interview you did with him brings that through again.
No doubt it sure does. He actually goes into quite a bit of detail about the G4 cars, because he's got experience with Mitsubishi Lancers quite a lot during his early times in his career, and he's now essentially driving a Mitsubishi Lancer in a proto car. So it's interesting how he compares driving that car versus the Hyundai G4 at the minute, and just the way the development has gone with his car, and I guess a different direction that he's taking it in. So it's an interesting topic. Well, without further ado, we'll lead on to Nathan Quinn's interview, and until next fortnight, we'll keep you up to date with all the rallying news on our website. And if you can give our podcast a rate, if you can subscribe to it on your favorite platform, and keep spreading the word, and we'll keep bringing you more talk and chatter across Australia and New Zealand rallying.
Absolutely, Luke, and just wish all our listeners a happy Easter, and hope the Easter Bunny comes.
We hope so. Talk to you soon. Nathan Quinn, thanks for sparing half an hour in your busy schedule to spend some time here with us. How are you doing this morning?
Yeah, pretty good, mate. Good temperature here. Weather's beautiful. I don't know whether I'll turn up to work at this rate.
You're the boss, mate. Maybe you might have to. It's a beautiful Coffs Coast morning by the looks of your background there. Happy birthday for last weekend, by the way. I think it was your birthday, was it? Did you spend it working on rally cars?
No, actually, I didn't spend it on working on rally cars for once. But yeah, it's pretty tough turning 27 for the last 10 years in a row. So it's definitely taking its toll.
We're going to fly through a number of topics here, because there's plenty to talk about with you, because you're such a busy man. First cab off the rank will be Rally Launceston. It was a mixed result for you, with Saturday and Sunday being different to each other, I could say. You were within arm's reach of the championship. How do you sum up the weekend in Tasmania with how everything panned out?
Look, I think we've sort of achieved what we set out to achieve in Launceston, and I'll be honest, Forest Rally was dependent on how things went at Launceston. If it all went terrible, then we probably weren't going to go to Forest Rally. And look, Saturday was a disappointment. I made a greedy pace note and committed to it, which is always a good thing, and paid the price. If it was a blind rally, that would never have happened. But I'm well aware of that mistake and what it could have meant. But to fight back to get through on that Saturday, and then to fight back for a good result on Sunday, I think was paid dividends to the team. So yeah, it was a relief to get it done, and I think by the end of the weekend, although it was looking grim on Saturday, we certainly achieved what we set out to.
There were some genuine roadside repairs on that Saturday from that unfortunate mistake you mentioned. What actually broke on the car, and I guess what were the challenges in trying to fix that?
So what happened was there was a rock on the inside of the left-hand bend at the bottom of this little descent, and I had it in my stage description and in the notes, and it was a 50-50, straddle the rock or go back 2 gears and sort of drive around it. And after talking to Lewis, he went back 2 gears and drove around it, and in hindsight, that's what I should have done. But as I approached the rock, I did straddle it, but I was probably carrying more speed than I anticipated, and I had to pull on a little bit extra lock when I got to that point, and picked up something further in the bush. And I'll be honest, it's not the first time I've damaged the left-hand front suspension, and it typically tends to happen for me every time I pull on that little bit extra lock. It just turns that wheel out and picks up something it shouldn't. So it actually snapped the front lower control arm rear rose joint, and it's a 3/4 inch thread, and snapped it clean off. And at that point, I thought it was just a flat tire, but as we proceeded down the road, every time we jumped on the brakes, the left-hand front wheel would fall back into the A pillar, and also bent the tire at end. So I got it back to the refuel and had a bit of a look, and it also damaged the drive shaft to a point where it destroyed the drive shaft. And I strapped it up with the spare wheel strap and pulled it forward, and Ray asked, "Is it going to be okay?" And I said, "Oh, I have no idea." And proceeded on for the rest of the rally. But I did make a mention to someone that I'm an AIS inspector, so I do rego inspections, roadworthy inspections on vehicles in New South Wales, and I'm telling you right now that did not meet any roadworthiness, and to get it through on just the strap, I was pretty impressed myself.
Yeah, I can well imagine. I think the stage after too was delayed as well, so the roadside repairs didn't cost you too much time in penalties. They sort of worked out okay when the next stage came around.
Yeah, and look, I was on the phone to the old man prior to that stage, and we learnt the hard way last year in Canberra about not giving up and how it can actually detriment your result. And he was sitting there going, "Well, maybe you should sit it out, maybe just go back, take the penalties and rejoin." But me being me, I hate missing kilometres, and the ARCs, in my opinion, are probably not long enough to afford to drop a few kilometres. And every time you miss out on a K or two. It's development, testing, and also practice. So I sort of, we didn't agree on me continuing, but I just said it'll be fine. I'll try and manage my time, not to lose too much time in the stage, and to only lose 2 minutes in 20 odd K with basically three wheels. That was pretty impressive. And obviously we lost. We took some penalties for late time, but come Saturday afternoon, it turns out we managed it nearly perfectly, and we're able to maximise our time to get the repairs done. Because not only did we have problems with the tearing the front end out, but as the rally proceeded, we actually damaged the oil pump to a point in the last stage on Saturday. We had no oil pressure coming over the finish line. So we had quite a bit of work to do on Saturday evening, and the crew worked around the clock basically. And the missus came to one of her first rallies away with me, and she ended up exploring the countryside and driving across to Devonport to pick up a drive shaft from a bloke called Daniel there. So it was a bit of a lifesaver, that one.
It's hard to win a heat with only 3 drive shafts, that's for sure. But Sunday, I guess you got to grips with the roads, and the car was good enough to be fast. You mentioned before we hit record that you'd never sort of driven on roads that are like Tasmania. Did you enjoy those roads, and therefore that's why the time came on Sunday?
Yeah, it was. They're really hard. They're not a difficult road, but it was really hard to get my head around them. I try to compare roads to other stages I've done in the past or other areas, and I just couldn't quite put my thumb on it. And I guess the closest thing I compared it to was probably like a fast, more open, smoother version of Canberra. But even in saying that, like it was quite tricky. I guess the beauty of it all was that there was quite a lot of grip in the road. They did have a really good flow, and there was sections in there that was just like a roller coaster. And I get a good kick out of that sort of stuff. And I think probably one of the important things people don't realise is when you get a feel for a road, or you really enjoy that road, you tend to drive far better than you would if you were, forced to drive a piece that you don't want to drive, So I think for sure the enjoyment in that road style certainly helped my driving style, and we're able to capitalise on that and get some good times down.
So you're telling me then that you enjoy the fast style of roads that's like Coffs Harbour and it's like Tasmania, which is sort of no surprise. Is that your preference versus a technical rally like Canberra, or even Western Australia is a little bit technical as well and slower?
Well, it's interesting when I look back at events and look at stage times and what stages I think I'd be stronger on. I am a little bit scared of the fast stuff, but it does tend to seem that I tend to be I tend to be faster on the fast stuff than what I anticipate, and then on the technical stuff, which is what I reckon I enjoy, often I'm off the pace on that. So yeah, if you would ask me, I would say that I prefer the technical stuff, but the times say otherwise. So look, I'd go back to Tassie for sure. The event ran seamlessly. The roads were great. It was really overall an enjoyable event, and it was great way to kick off what could potentially be a big season for us.
Good to hear. Now the G4 car's running well. Since you've got it, I would imagine that it's come on leaps and bounds. Hence the speed and the winning speed you showed, obviously in Coffs Harbour and in Launceston. I want to understand a bit more about the car itself, though. The details of your, I guess it's a Hyundai i20 with Evo 10 running gear underneath. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So it's a proto car, and the active team have had it for quite some time, and it spent a bit of time as a rallycross car, and then we picked it up at the start of last year from JJ Hatton. It runs the Evo 10 gear, and basically the short of it is it's an Evo 10, and it's about 100 mil shorter in the wheelbase, and it's about 100 kilos lighter. So fundamentally, that's it, the only difference apart from a fat looking body kit. Now, I think what's important to know is that the G4 for me is an ideal platform, and I'd love to own an R5 or a proper AP4, but simply we couldn't afford to do that. And I think if we can get the G4 platform up running competitive, I think it's definitely the future for Australian rallying, because not all of us can afford those beautiful machines, and what you're paying for is the development that's in those R5 and AP4 cars. So fundamentally, an Evo 10, as we learnt, in the previous 2 years, are an absolute awesome machine. They're just too big and too heavy. So that's sort of what we anticipated when we first got the i20, was the Evo 10, but better. But it's, proven that there were some challenges to overcome to get that car to work right. And realistically, any car, doesn't matter, if it's the fastest car in the world, it may not be the fastest car with you driving it. You've got to get them to fit like a glove. It's imperative. And even I was naive to think prior to last year that I should have just jumped in and went faster. It's all about getting that car to work for you.
So you've been in an R5 car before, and you've also driven a couple of different proto cars. You've driven Richie Dalton's old Ford Fiesta as well as a Peugeot at one point. Where does your G4 car stack up to that since, I guess, you've developed it? How do you measure how far it's come since when you got it last year?
Yeah, definitely. The active guys built a great car. It's got all the bells and whistles, but it just wasn't working for my driving style. And I've had the benefit of driving a number of cars, and I'm very fortunate to have done that. And so I got a pretty good idea of what works for me and what doesn't. And Justin Bayliss Evo 10 that we drove, I'd have to be honest, is probably one of the most enjoyable cars I've driven, even though it was a big old tank. And I would say that I'm yet to get the Hyundai to have the same balance that Evo 10 has. Mm-hmm. The Ford Fiesta R5 car was the last and only R5 car I've driven, and it was unreal, but it was a completely different driving style to a production car. And what's interesting is, between all these cars, they go about things completely different. And I think, in my opinion, when we got the i20, it was trying to become an R5 Fiesta. Like, it was all relying on chassis and, body roll and things like that. And I think the main changes we've made is stiffening it back up and making it more like a production car. And the philosophy behind that is it's got production car suspension and, droop and all that sort of stuff. And I think you've sort of got to simplify it. Is the car designed to have all this droop and all this geometry, or is it not? And that's probably the changes that we've made. We've stiffened it all back up and made it a lot more like a production car, and the car is working better.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, you know, of all the AP4 style of cars, G4 cars I've driven, I drove the Peugeot over in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
And I drove Richie's Fiesta. I would certainly say it's better than what I have driven. But it's still not where I want it to be, and we're getting closer and closer. So we've got a few changes that we're trialing, and I definitely do it at a slower rate than I would like, but we tend to make our own problems at events that stop this development. But I think I'll get it very close at Perth to where I want it to be, and once I get it there, it'll probably be as good as you can get them, in my opinion.
Now, an Evo 9 and an Evo 10, as you say, are still competitive, but body panels and stuff like that are ridiculously expensive when you look to buy it. And say if you knock a corner off it, it's very expensive to repair. Is it the same when it comes to the running gear that, for example, is in your Hyundai i20, which is, I guess, essentially a Mitsubishi at the end of the day? Is it still expensive to repair in terms of its running gear?
No, not really. The only, like, all the suspension arms in it, Race Fab or Active's.
Yeah, for sure.
Active's version of Race Fab. So it's got the chrome moly arms and the spherical joints and things like that. So, you know, they're a little bit bespoke. You can put the standard arms back in at the expense of some droop, and we hope to find out whether or not we need that extra droop in the future, and that's primarily just to see whether or not you can get away with going to that expense of buying those parts. But realistically, the beauty of the G4 is if you do bust something or break something, for example, a drive shaft like we did at Tassie, we're able to source one relatively easy because, you know, there's Evo 10s, there's Evo 9s, there's Subarus around, and someone owns one or knows a mate that owns one, and you can always rob parts from it. Body wise, you know, we've been through a few mudguards on that i20 since we've had it, and you know, they're supplied by Active, and they're relatively inexpensive. You know, I think we're paying about $300 a mudguard, and I think I do about one a rally. So and apart from that, you know, it's a Hyundai i20 doors and tailgate, and you know, we've just got probably the highest maintenance thing on the car is the flares. They just get peppered with rocks. So, you know, I don't know what it's like for someone like Tom Clark and the Fiesta R5. I'd say, you know, unless you carry a decent spares package, you're sort of a little bit buggered in that respect, because you can't just go down and take a drive shaft out of the pizza delivery guy's bloody Fiesta, you know. So I think in that respect, we're on a good format there.
And guys like Mick Patton have built their own G4 cars on a budget, and being able to transfer the running gear into a Fiesta or a car that's similar is working well, I guess, across the country, and there's more and more. So it's a good way to go faster, and I guess have cheaper running costs at the end of the day in terms of bodywork and the like.
Yes, certainly. And like I say, it's a proven package, the 2-litre turbocharged cars, and you know, I think it's a great opportunity. If I was only chatting to an owner of an Evo 9 last night, and he was asking about the G4, and I said it's a great format, and I said if I had my way again, I would have not sold Shirley at the end of 17. I would have driven it harder and faster to a point where I might have destroyed the shell, and then I should have taken all the gear out of it and put it in a contemporary proto shell, you know, and that probably would have been my best option after all this. But you live and learn, and I'm just glad that we can still be out there and being competitive in cars that are yet to be proven, and we just hope to lead by example, and it's an opportunity for more of us to go rallying if it's more affordable.
Absolutely. And now your car appeared in an ad recently, I believe. Tell me about that. I guess, where was it recorded, and I guess, is that the reason why it was navy blue? Was that the Super Cheap Auto ad I saw?
Yeah. So that was an interesting foray and into the television, I guess. I've done a lot of home videos, as you can imagine. No, but it was a great experience. It was a last minute experience, and when the car got wrapped, we quite like the simplicity of the single colour. But also too, it was a week before the Coffs rally, so it's the reason why it stayed navy blue, and it definitely grew on us. And there was a few stunts in there that were quite difficult given the limited amount of speed we're able to carry. So but it was at an old golf course up in the Gold Coast, and it was a good experience. Met some great people, and there's some cool cars there as well, but it was definitely a tight time frame. And perhaps if it wasn't for that ad, I wouldn't have broken another drive shaft on the last day at Coffs, and I possibly could have taken it to Hayden. So that's another what if, but great experience nonetheless. And the car looks great, but there certainly will be a time where we will relive it again, and come up with a fresh look soon.
That won't be in time for the Forest Rally, I wouldn't imagine. So it's 2010 and 2017. You've been there before. What do you expect out of this time around? I guess the stages are very similar to what they have been in the past. I guess year on year, they stay pretty much the same. What are you expecting of the Forest Rally?
It's an interesting one. Another difficult rally for us in terms that we'll be on the back foot. All our competitors there are going to be new sets of notes and pretty fresh on where to go. And I remember from 2010, I turned up there in 17, and I was doing some recce, and things felt familiar, and that was a 7-year gap. So we're going back on, what is it now? Another 7 odd. Yeah. And so we're going to turn up sort of in a similar boat to what we did in 17. And we didn't have a good run there in 17. But what we also need to realise is, our main rivals are turning up after doing the event last year. So it's certainly on the back foot. It's certainly going to be tough, but we're going to obviously manage our rally. I wouldn't say we're going to push too hard. I expect I should be able to drive through that with relative ease and bank a good result, because I believe if we can manage to keep the car moving, bank good points, then our strongest rally this year, I think, will be potentially Queensland and then Canberra. So there's a bigger picture for us, and I'm not saying that we're committed to the full championship, but that's definitely the way we're tailored, and it's important for me and the team that we have a nice run at Perth, and make no more silly mistakes, and just enjoy the event. And I'd love to come away with a win, but I think I'll just manage it as we go.
And it's a similar thing to 2017, I guess. I think your strategy was very similar that year in terms of let's go round by round early in the year and hope things continue on as they go. And I guess that turned out okay. So maybe this year could be the same. Who knows?
Well, it could be the lucky charm. But look, in 17, I think it was a budgetary thing. And for sure, if something had have happened early in the year and put us out, or there's a big expense, then we simply couldn't afford to continue. This year, it's very similar, but instead of dollars, it's just time. And we've got a little business in Cross Harbour, and I've got a little team of guys, and they love being involved in the rallies, but it's very difficult for me to get away. And we're going these long distances to do, in my opinion, short rallies, probably spread out over too many days. So let's say, for example, Perth goes terrible, or we're not going to continue to take 4 days off work to chase a championship that we can't win. So time's of the essence for us, and not only do I feel guilty leaving the shop to the boys, but we can only afford to take so much time off before it really starts to impact us. So one rally at a time at the moment, and if we can keep the results up, then it's justification to keep going.
Before I let you go, we'll touch briefly on the RX2. What's it up to at this point? Is it sitting in its Alpine dust and stuff, or still in the Alpine stickers maybe?
It certainly is. It's going to be a tough one taking those panels off the door. But as a matter of fact, we were meant to run it at an AMSAG event earlier this year, and then they changed the format to just repeat stages. And the Mazda doesn't really like repeat stages. But as a result, I changed to the Hyundai for a test, and they were in need of a zero car. So the old man got an opportunity to drive the Mazda and as a zero car, and he absolutely loved it. Didn't scratch it. Used up all my secondhand tires, which I was absolutely shocked about. But he said to me, he goes, "You know what? This car just does everything you want it to do." And I said, "Yeah, I know. I don't build a bad car, eh?" So, but yeah, it's sitting there. We've got events on the calendar for it. Some of the team that work on the car want it put away and stored in a museum, and I sort of sit there and go, "There's no possible chance of that." It's such a great car, and it's every time I drive it, it's got just a lot of nostalgia in it. And we hope to bring it out at a couple of East Coast AMSAG events, and we've heard rumours of a new event in Victoria at the end of the year. So if that goes ahead, then you'll certainly see it back out down there. And we obviously take care of it, but there's more left in that Mazda yet.
Definitely. Nathan, Quinn, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate you coming on and taking out some of your morning with us. Good luck at the Forest Rally, and we look forward to following along, and hopefully it's another strong result for you.
Yep, fingers crossed, and can't wait, and hopefully we come away with the goods.
Thanks for coming on. Cheers.
Cheers, mate.